You're listening to Always Player One, a solo board gaming podcast.
Hello and welcome to Always Player One. I'm Scruffy.
And I'm not Norm.
And Kendall is not Norm.
Yeah, if you follow the planning phase, if you're a Patreon supporter or if you're on the Discord, you might have heard Norm is unfortunately not doing so well health-wise at the moment, and he's taking a little break from the podcast. He's still going to be around on the Discord if you want to talk to him there, but I'm stepping in as a kind of friend of the show. I'm going to hopefully be a seamless replacement until he's feeling a bit better and can come back and get back to the show that we know and love.
That's right, and the person who's behind the voice here is Kendall Mackenzie, who everyone will hopefully recognise from our Christmas episode, and the mastermind behind Rollway Station. Isn't that right, Kendall?
Yeah, well, I'm the mind behind it. I don't know if I'd go that far, but yeah, I'm Kendall. I have been on a couple of episodes before. If you want to go back and listen to those, yeah. So what game are we talking about today, anyway, Scruffy? What are we doing?
Yes. So today we are going to be talking about Clans of Caledonia, and we'll go over the description in a moment. But I know that's one of your favourites, isn't it, Kendall?
It is. Yeah, it's a game that I impulse bought from my local game store a while ago, round about when it came out, and introduced it to Scruffy and to Norm as well. We've played it together a few times. And also very similar to Terra Mystica, which Scruffy will remember is the first game that we ever played together as a group of three.
Yes, first game I ever played together with you. But Clans of Caledonia I have in my mind as quintessentially a game I play with you all the time. So it's absolutely ideal having you on to talk about it with me today. Before we dive into talking about clans, however, I just want to throw a couple of shout outs up right at the start of the episode here. First one, very excited. For any of our listeners who speaks German, there is a new podcast out by our regular listener, Peter Lovelace, who is on our Discord. Everyone in Discord will know them. And links will be in the description for you guys to check out. It's another solo board gaming podcast, and it looks like it's a lot of fun. I had a bit of a listen. I don't actually speak German, so I can't say to the content, but the audio quality was just right. I don't know. Did you get a chance to check it out?
I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet. Just to drop the name in the show, it's called Einzelspiel, and it's also there's another member of the Discord, Cooper, edits that as well. So we've got a couple of members of our sort of community involved in making that. I do speak German, but only a very, very tiny amount, and it has been years. I did it at school, but haven't kept up with it. So unfortunately, I don't think I'll be able to understand.
Yeah, good luck with that, Peter, and go check it out. Other shout-outs we have, I just want to say a quick thank you to the Cardboard Herald. Their video on the 3 different ways of playing Clans of Caledonia solo, links again in the description, was really helpful in research for the show. And finally, a shout out to Christopher Park Thomas, who designed a fan-made Automa, which we'll be talking about in the episode. I think that's all the shout outs for now. Yeah, so I'll dive right into the description for Clans of Caledonia. Clans of Caledonia is a 1 to 4 player economic strategy game in which you take on the role of a 19th century Scottish clan aiming to obtain the most glory through your cunning management of resources, production, and trade. At the start of the game, you will be allowed a choice of which clan to play, each offering special abilities and a random starting resource bonus. The game is played over 5 rounds, and each round has you take actions to further your resource income and presence on the map, as well as upgrade your player board and fulfill contracts. The map consists of multiple hexes, each with a price and land type or types depicted on them. This land type determines what can be built where. There are also 4 port tiles at the corner of the map offering 1-use bonuses. Each round, you can take as many actions as you like, and most cost money, so you will often play until you cannot afford to make any more moves. The most common action is to build production buildings on the map, taking them from your player board, paying their cost and the tile cost for where they will be built. You can also trade for resources, sending traders to the market to buy or sell goods and adjust their price on the market board relative to how much you buy or sell. At the end of the round, you will receive income based on what you have built and then score points based on the end of round bonus, randomly determined at setup. Besides this end of round bonus, points are also scored mainly through fulfilling contracts, which are available to take as an action on your turn. The cost for taking a contract increases as the game goes on, incentivizing you to take as many as you can early, but you are only able to hold one at a time and must complete it before taking another. There are only 5 contracts available each round, and they only replenish at the end of the round. Contracts will always cost resources, and sometimes even production buildings, cows and sheep specifically, to fulfill and reward you with varied amounts of points and other bonuses. The most common of these is the variable endgame scoring resources, cotton, tobacco, and sugarcane, each being worth points dependent on how much is owned of each, with the most common one being worth the least. So, for example, if you own 10 sugarcane, 6 cotton, and 4 tobacco, at the end of the game, the tobacco would be worth the most points. In a solo game, you also score for having a certain number of contracts completed and a certain number of settlements on the map. Settlements are simply clusters of production buildings separated by either lakes or rivers, which can be reached based on your shipping upgrades, and can be any size. Additionally, in a solo game, 2 dice are rolled at the end of the round, and these change one specific market resource, moving it up or down by 1 to 3 spaces, depending on what's rolled. These dice also dictate which contract is removed, leaving only 5 available each round instead of the 6 available in 2-player. That is Clans of Caledonia in a nutshell. Kendall, being the veteran of the game, have I missed anything important?
No, I think you covered everything there quite well, quite thoroughly, without going into too much detail at all. I think the only thing that possibly was missing was just the kind of tech tree, I suppose you could call it, of some of your production buildings are basic production buildings, and some of them are advanced production buildings. So you have cows, for example, which produce milk, but then you have dairies which make cheese out of milk, and you can get that milk either from your cows or you can buy it at the market, which I think is a really interesting tension as to whether you make the big investment up front for the cows or if you go just for buying milk instead.
Yeah, because it's worth mentioning again that this is all happens during the production phase. So at the end of the round, once you say, I've done all my actions, that's when this all triggers. You get all your resources, any money you've got for your workers you've put out, any milk you've got for your cows, wool for sheep, grain for grain, and then you turn any of those produced resources or any you have on hand into the secondary resources with the advanced buildings of dairy, bread makers, and whiskey, most importantly of all. Yes, good point. Thank you for spotting that oversight for us. Right, okay. I want to say right up front, it is an absolutely incredible solo experience, Clans. Did you feel the same? Because I know you've played Clans quite a lot before, even before the podcast. This is my first time playing it, just researching for the podcast, and wow, did I have a lot of fun.
It's interesting you mentioned that, actually, because my very first note in my notepad is also, it's just one of my favourite games ever.
That's brilliant. In my notes, I've put top feels like eating an eclair all to myself. That's what I put.
Yeah, I really like this game. It's one of my favourite multiplayer games out there in general, and I'm pretty hard to please when it comes to multiplayer games. I'm even harder to please when it comes to solo games. So the fact that one of my favorites multiplayer is also so much fun solo is really good. I've played it dozens of times,
and they're different, aren't they? They're very different games, playing it multiplayer and playing it solo. But it doesn't feel like, so in a lot of games that you get like this that are really good multiplayer and have lots of tension and stuff, which it does have in multiplayer, where you're trying to react to what the other person's doing and moving around the board, trying to manipulate the market so they don't get any benefits from it and things like that. All of that's obviously taken out for this. And I thought going in that it'd be a roads and boats situation, which is something I talked about in the roads and boats. So we strip out the player, what's left? But actually, I think you end up with this really lovely solitaire game that does feel indulgent and fun and still puzzly and nice. It takes on a new life, a new lease of life, and a new sort of set of skills, I guess. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, the way I sort of think about it is twiddling dials and knobs is just really fun. There's a debate in the fighting game community that comes up every once in a while over really complicated button inputs. If you play stuff like Street Fighter, some of those have really complicated, weird button presses that you need to do special moves. And personally, I think the best argument for keeping those in is people like pressing buttons.
That's
And
nice.
that's what playing clans solo feels like to me. I have that linked in my mind. It's I like pressing the buttons. And solo really, really lets you do that in a kind of contained environment. You're going to have a little bit of antagonism from the randomness in the game with the contracts being eliminated. Sometimes a contract you've been working towards that you haven't yet picked up will be eliminated by that die roll. And sometimes the market will fluctuate in a way that doesn't benefit you. But you have complete control over the board. The solo game doesn't have any rules beyond setup for determining what spaces are available. And I really like having that kind of blank canvas to build something because I find it really fun.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel exactly the same way. I think it's worth mentioning that the mode we're talking about now is the solo mode in the rulebook.
Yes, the default solo mode.
And there are 3 different solo modes kind of out there. This is what I gave the shout out right at the start to Cardboard Herald. So the 3 different solo modes are the one in the rulebook, which I think are both really big fans of.
Yes.
There's a fan-made Automa, and there's a kind of semi-official Automa as well, which I didn't get around to looking at in much detail. We'll get onto those later. But yes, we're talking about the one in the rulebook. All it does is it covers all the one-cost tiles. All the cheapest tiles on the board are taken away. And that's fine. You just live with that.
And it doesn't block them in the same way that an opponent would block them either. They are essentially a void. If an opponent in a multiplayer game, if an opponent's built somewhere, you can get certain bonuses by building near them. That just doesn't get touched in solo at all. They are just blank, void, can't build their spaces.
Big old mountain tiles. The mountains of Scotland.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and that is it. So that's the effort you put in for the AI, other than rolling the dice at the end of every round. So you roll the dice 5 times. And that's all you get for the, I say AI,
Well, that's an interesting point to actually pick up on. I know you had a discussion a few episodes back with Norm about what's an AI, what's an artificial opponent, what's an antagonist, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And I found through the various sort of solo games I've played, and I've generally found that my favorites tend to be the ones that don't try to put any sort of artificial player in there. They just replicate a couple of the really important parts. So for me, the really important part with the other players in clans that you couldn't have the game without is that supply and demand mechanic in the market. Obviously, if you're playing multiplayer with the supply and demand, you can look at what other people are doing and you can adapt your strategy going, oh, this person's selling a lot of milk. That means milk's going to be really cheap. I'm going to start making cheese because I can buy the milk really cheap. Something like that. In this game, you can't quite do that with the same degree of foresight because obviously it is just randomly chosen. It will be 3 different resources every round. So half of the different resources will change price every round. But what I thought was really, really clever about the dice is it attempts to sort of simulate that drive to push prices back to the middle. So when you're playing with real people, generally once prices for say whiskey start creeping really high, if lots of people have been buying them, they're much more likely to sell it and drive the price back down. And that's what the dice do. You have a d6 with a plus and minus 1 to 3. But if you're outside of the middle bracket of prices, which is printed on the board, you ignore the plus or minus and you just push it towards the middle. So if it's particularly cheap...
Yeah, it stabilizes really nicely, doesn't it?
Yeah, if it's particularly cheap, if it comes up on the dice, it will increase in price if it's very cheap, or it will decrease. And I just loved that. I thought that was such an elegant way to... You're not trying to say this is an actual player. You're not trying to emulate an actual player, but you're emulating a rough effect of what an actual player might do in a way that's very quick and easy and understandable.
Yeah, and I think importantly, it can not stabilize. Like it could stay outside of that bracket if it doesn't roll on the other dice the specific resource to change it.
Yeah,
And in those situations, that's just like in a solo, in a multiplayer game where the other player, and this is a real kind of linchpin for why I think clans work so well, is that clans, when you're playing multiplayer or solo, you exist in a world of your own plans. And whilst the impetus exists there for you to try and influence your opponent or react to your opponent and maybe alter the prices if they're collecting lots of whiskey, maybe you want to bring the price of whiskey down by selling some of your own or whatever, that has to coincide with your own plans. You can't just have that be your only goal, because it would be at the detriment potentially, maybe you can't produce whiskey, in which case you can't affect the whiskey price on the market. You'd have to buy it to sell it, and that would be the opposite, if that makes sense.
yeah, no, I agree. I agree to an extent. I do think it's definitely it can be a very mean game multiplayer, a very very mean game, particularly with sniping out contracts from underneath someone. You see they're working
Yeah.
towards something, you go, oh, well, I can do that, so I'll take that contract. But yeah, I agree. It's
But only if you can, though, because you couldn't
Yeah.
just take that contract if you had, for example, if that contract is for 3 beef, and the way you fulfill a contract for beef is you have to sacrifice 3 cow buildings that you've put on the board. It's a very brutally mean economic game, clans. It often feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I don't know if you feel that way. But in that case, you couldn't just take that contract for the beef if you couldn't do it, because you'd be sabotaging yourself more than you'd be sabotaging your opponent.
That is true. Yeah.
And so in that way, the dice mirror a player in that sometimes they will affect you. And especially on the market board, that's where it's most likely to happen, especially when it's outside of those brackets, which it accounts for. But sometimes they won't. And it's the first time that I remember feeling that the luck of the dice, when I rolled them for the AI or whatever you want to call it in clans, felt really similar to a player. Like I felt like there was, as I had to take as much consideration for that as I did for another player when I play multiplayer. Perhaps when you play multiplayer, you can kind of predict if another player might be able to affect your plans, and then therefore might be more willing to do it. But even then, they might not. And so when you're playing, you just have to play the best game you can, even in multiplayer, and just hope that they don't take that one move that's going to mess you up. And it's the same with the dice. I played one game where I was like, well, I'm going to bet as much whiskey as I can in for this last round, and I got it all in, and just the dice happened to give whiskey -3. But I was like, I knew it could happen. And
that is really unfortunate.
Just one of those.
That is very unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose that the tightness for me in the multiplayer comes from the fact you're alternating activations. So it's about getting to things first more than it is messing people's plans up.
Yes.
If there's one really cheap tile that you can build on for 1 or 2 money as opposed to 5 or 6 surrounding it, being 1 turn ahead and able to get there first is really important. And in solo, I actually quite like that you can just sort of ignore that to an extent. You have to optimize within your rounds, but you can go back and forth, and it's more of a fun optimization puzzle. And I find that it's a complex enough game, and it's challenging enough, and you need to put a lot of effort in, that I find it really satisfying to just get to build something up without having to worry about an opponent.
Yeah, that strikes at the heart of it, doesn't it? That when you're playing multiplayer, you can have all these grandiose plans for your round, but that they might be dependent on a certain number of things. Like, okay, the most strategic thing for me to do now is I need to build there first, then use the port, then pick up the contract. And that way I can do everything just as I want to. But in a multiplayer game, because you take a turn, they take a turn, you take a turn, you might have to just grab that contract straight away. And that might not be perfect for your overall round plans. You might end up having a suboptimal, because clans is a game about optimization, and in solo it is, that side of it is even more sort of vibrant and allowed to just grow, branch out, and become even more fun every round. In multiplayer, you almost don't have quite as much freedom to optimize, and in its place you have a bit more freedom to react and respond. You get to we mentioned just before that you get to visit the market at a discounted price if you build next to one of their production buildings, for example. That sort of reaction and opportunistic play doesn't exist in the solo, but in its place, there is something, and that is the branching optimization plays.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree. I'd agree with you there. And I think that's why they complement each other really nicely, the solo and the multiplayer mode. This isn't a game. I know a lot of people say, like for Mage Night or whatever, a lot of people will say, I'd only play this solo. Or a lot of games that say 1 to 4 players, really, you're maybe only going to play them with 3 and 4 because the 1 player is a bit rubbish and the 2 player is but then you get to 3 and it starts to really kick in. I have a lot of games like that. Maybe I'm just picky.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I think every single gamer listening is nodding along right now.
A lot of games, they have a player count that's written on the box, and that player count is like, it's technically accurate, but it's kind of I've played clans with all the player counts. I've played it with 1. It's a brilliant game. I've played it with 2, 3, 4. I love it at every player count.
Yeah, I mean, I've only ever played it 1 to 3. I've never played 4 player, but yeah, I mean, I think that is the point that I think so many games forget that you can't just take away players and not replace it with something. And maybe this just happened by accident with clans, and maybe it wasn't that well thought out, but it feels like it's intentional, and you know, who knows, but it has got something instead of a player. It's instead of playing against someone and having to have all the cons that come with multiplayer of having the downtime between turns, you will lose that lovely opportunistic play, but instead you get to have the game all to yourself. And that's, it's like what I said at the start, it's like eating a whole eclair. It just feels so luxurious and indulgent and fun, but also so fast. Like,
yeah.
The game says that playtime is 30 minutes per player, and I didn't think it would be a 30-minute game just playing on my own. I know the game pretty well, but even my learning game, I swear it was over in 30 minutes. Like, even when I didn't know how the thing was, and I was learning the rules as I went, it was so quick, and I could just chain play this.
It really doesn't overstay its welcome. I tend to play solo games on Tabletop Sim. I mean, I own Clans of Caledonia physically. I've played it solo physically. I don't have a table really at the moment. Well, I do have a very small table, but it's covered in stuff. So if I want to play a solo board game, I have to play it on the floor, which is really bad for my back, or I have to play it on Tabletop Sim. And if you factor in the fact that setup is mostly all done for you, you can bang out a game in 20 minutes sometimes, which honestly, for the sort of game that it is really, really, really good. It's a massive plus in my eyes, because I wouldn't want to sit there for 45 minutes, an hour, playing something like Clans solo. Playing it with other people, I'm more than happy to do that. But when you bring it into solo, you get the much more focused experience, and that just works with the much shorter playtime.
Yeah, I mean, I've played it on Tabletop Sim as well, and so setup and takedown was a breeze. The table I used was the one by Kernalis. I think that's how you say it, Cernalis. Yeah, it's a really good table, and if you save a setup state, and you can vary the map every time if you want to, you can change there's 4 big block corners of the map with all the tiles on them, and you can, they're double-sided, but they always stay in the same. One is the northwest, one is the northeast, one is southwest, one is southeast. So there's 16 potential maps, which is a nice amount of variability, and obviously you have the varying contracts every time, the different, how many clans are there? There's something like 6 clans, 7 clans?
I think there's about 8.
8, and they're all fun.
Well, I was just going to bring the clans up, actually, because we've talked quite a bit about... Sorry, I feel like I've sidetracked you there.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say that having the quick playtime, you are keen to play another game because it's so variable and so quick and easy to set up and play a new game. I really didn't expect it. I thought, having played it multiplayer, that it was going to be a fairly lengthy experience, but I was very pleasantly surprised to find that, oh, that was the whole game. That was really fun, really enjoyable. That's the score. Maybe I should try a new clan that I haven't tried yet, solo, and see how they work. And I did.
Yeah,
and it was great.
That adds on to what I was going to say about the clans. Is that I haven't done it yet, but I have in the past played multiple games in a row. And one of the things that's interesting about solo is you could theoretically, you're dealt multiple clans to choose from at the start of the game, which is quite nice because you can look at sort of what's available contract wise and what the board looks like. And you can kind of go, well, this clan might be slightly better this time, so I'm going to play them. What I've been tempted to do and haven't got around to doing yet is playing multiple games in a row where I go through each of the different clan options that I had and try and see which one I can get the best score with, which I haven't done yet, but I think I might at some point do that because that sounds quite fun and interesting.
So what do you mean? So you'd play a game with one clan?
When you start the game, you're dealt multiple clans to choose from.
It's the number of players plus one, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. So it would be two for solo. And I've often got to the end of a game and thought, maybe I should play that same game again, the same board setup, the same initial contract tiles, even if I can remember them, but choosing the other clan to see how I would have done if I'd picked them.
And that's interesting.
Because I really love how differently each of those clans forces you to play.
Mm-hmm.
The powers that they have, the powers are really, really straightforward, but they change the way you play so much.
Yeah.
So, for example, there's Clan Cunningham, which these are all based on actual Scottish clans as well. And there's in the rulebook in the back.
Yeah. Oh, the lore is really good.
It's super neat. It has the section that talks about the clans in the rulebook is my favorite, probably my favorite part of a rulebook ever, because it has a little bit of flavor text as to what that clan is famous for, why they're known, what did they do during the Industrial Revolution. And then it has a description of their power, but then it also has tips on how to play them correctly or play them well. And some of those tips are actually some of them are really straightforward. Like this one has a discount at the market, so you want to go to the market a lot. But some of them give you actually some quite interesting things to think about when you're playing that clan, which is super cool. Like, for example, there's one clan that Clan Cunningham that makes butter. They have a new sort of resource in inverted commas that they can make. They can turn milk into butter, which is just another way of getting monetary income. But what it means is it guides them towards building a lot of cows early so they can get milk income. It guides them away from contracts that require beef, because if they remove a cow from the board to fulfill one of those contracts, they're losing a lot for doing so. But then ultimately there's other powers. Like one of the powers is just another contract box. That's all it is. It doesn't have any text or icons on the tile. It is literally just another contract box that you can put another contract in. But even that, such a straightforward power, it warps the way you play so much, because it becomes more about, well, suddenly I can hold two contracts at once. So suddenly I'm trying to think more about optimization. Suddenly I'm trying to think, oh, well, I can juggle this. I can hold one long term if I want to make sure it doesn't get taken either by another player or by the random die roll in solo mode. It's, chef kiss.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Like, the whole game is constantly one of fun and interesting choices. And it's often the choice between do it now or save up and do it later. Sometimes that's embodied in the clans. For example, I think that the biggest embodiment of this for me was when I saw Clan Mackenzie.
Yep. Good old Clan Mackenzie.
And the way they distill ale is they just hold on to it, basically. And you don't use it. Every turn tick up, and you can take it off anytime you want, have it. But if you save it until later, you get a massive payout just for doing that. Great. But the thing is, you're when you're doing that, when you're holding on to stuff and saving up, I mean, even having a cow on the board instead of using it to fulfill a contract and just using it to produce its milk, you're saving up, you're getting something, but you are sacrificing the early incentives. And the early incentives in the game are really, really huge. Not only are they things like the contracts cost, they go from giving you money to take them right on turn one. They give you 5 money every time you take a contract, to costing you by round 5, 15 money every time you want to take one. And that's crippling.
A typical income in this game is about 50 to 60 if you're doing, pretty well. So 15 from that.
That's like end game income.
Yeah.
It feels like it anyway sometimes. It's a very penny pinchy game a lot of the
time.
Very
penny pinchy game, yeah.
Yeah, so it means that when if you do save up and you've got all the income stuff coming in at the end of the game, you're penalized for having that infrastructure there that you've saved up for, because now you can't pull the contracts up to fulfill them. So you have to kind of constantly balance this, and it's a choice that you are in charge of making throughout the entire game.
Mm.
And I love it. I find it so much fun and so exciting. And it is all about penny pinching, because one of the other benefits, well, two more benefits to doing things early. If you take a cow off the board, well, then presumably, if you're smart, you're taking it off one of the cheap tiles. So you can then build on that cheap tile again, right? So that's another benefit to doing this sort of self-sacrifice early momentum stuff. But also, every round you're scoring points, and those are usually based on, for example, it might be based on how much meat you have on your contracts that you fulfilled, or how many workers you have out on the board, for example. So you are kind of, it forces your hand to play lots and do lots early, because if you're not, then you're going to be missing out on those scores.
And the points don't hugely ramp up in the game either. Like, you, towards the end of the game, I mean, there's 5 rounds, you're going to get 7 or 8 contracts normally, I find myself handing in a game.
That's really good. That's really good. I think in solo, you're meant to aim. I think the most points you get is for seven or more. That's maximum points for completing contracts. That's what you want to be aiming for.
But 7 or 8 contracts, I mean, that's 1.5 per round, really, and they're spread pretty evenly. So you kind of need to be taking that early game opportunity. I actually think the sense of sort of satisfaction from the penny pinching, and when you just have exactly enough money left to do all the actions you need to do, or you can go, oh, but if I buy another merchant, I can sell this wool for 1 profit, and then I'll be able to afford to do this thing.
And then you have a merchant.
When you get a combination like that, it gives me the same sort of satisfaction as beating a city in Mage Knight. It's that sort of puzzly aspect that I think is really, really fun.
Yeah, I mean, just following on again from the early game stuff, we didn't even mention that the contracts don't just reward you with end game scoring. They also sometimes, some of them do. And so some of them you want to save up for the last turn, maybe, to try and get the end game scoring. But some of them give you literally 10 monies, or a free, you can ignore the cost of a tile, so you can build on one of those really awkward big cost tiles that's in the way of where you want to be expanding to. And so you are again incentivized to get that contract done turn 1. Go get it done, then you get that 10 money, because that 10 money in turn 1 means that you've then freed up the contract space to get another contract for 5 more money. And you can see how that kind of snowballs. And makes it very exciting in a way that only true board gamers can.
Exactly. The arc that you get as well, where you're sort of early, you're just taking whatever contracts you can do, and you're wanting to get the ones that give you nice bonuses, and then later your eyes sort of swing. You're like the Eye of Sauron. You've seen Frodo put the ring on, and you see that one contract that's going to give you 5 tobacco, and you're like, that's the one. That's the one I need now, which is really great.
And then suddenly you laser focus, zone in on it. And it's great fun. And the funny thing is that in a multiplayer game, you feel like there's competition for that. And the biggest sort of competition I find in multiplayer is when to pass, when to end your turn, because you get an extra bonus for ending early, and it gives you initiative in the next round. That doesn't exist in the solo game, but I didn't miss it once. I've only just realized that kind of now when I'm talking about it. And I don't know why. I mean, I found it really hard to pin down why specifically I didn't miss the other player. And I think it might be because it plays to the strengths of that, like we've said, that you have such a low intensity AI in that it's just the rolling the dice, and those dice even are economical. They count for 2 things because they do 2 things at once when you roll them. And so it just gets out of your way completely. You're allowed to just explore and have fun and indulge yourself in the decision space that you would normally have without another player.
That's really interesting that you say that, actually, because that's the one thing I miss most from playing it multiplayer. I really love that tension in games. I really like it in Terra Mystica. I really like it in Clans. I really like it in. We played quite a bit of Res Arcana
Oh yeah.
together, haven't we? That has a similar mechanic where passing first is good, but you obviously want to do more actions. I really like that mechanic in every game that it comes up in. And that is, I would say, the one thing I do miss most about playing solo clans is the tension of, can I afford to just eke out one or two more actions, or should I pass now because I want to keep the initiative? But different strokes for different folks. If that's not the sort of mechanic you like, yeah.
No, I think I feel the same way. I expected to miss it more, is what I'm getting at. Like, I came into it thinking that there's so much I like about the multiplayer. I'm exactly the same as you. I love all the tension. I love the opportunistic play and stuff. But I didn't miss it because the game just said to me, hey, you're playing a different way now. I guess it's how Norm felt with Roads and Boats, and I didn't. Because maybe it's a thing of that it wasn't as long. I don't know. I really can't say, because I didn't know how long it was going to be when I started, and I only knew after the first game. But every second of the game, I enjoyed the decision space that I was in.
Right.
I found it fun and interesting. How did you find the Automa, the fan-made Automa? Because this is a typical Automa. It's attempting to be a dummy player. You place the pieces for them. It has a lot of sort of fairly stripped down rules, a few sort of tweaks to give it extra power here and there to account for the fact that it's going to make blunders. But essentially, it's a deck of cards, and it will do X, Y, or Z on its turn in priority order. So usually it will try and fulfill and complete a contract. It can do that all as one action if it can. Then if it can't, it will draw a card and expand, or visit the market, depending on the card. And then it will just keep going, basically, like another player, blocking on the board, moving around. How did you find it?
So this is the Automa by Christopher Park Thomas, the one that we mentioned. I was all set, ready to record this, and then Scruffy's like, hey, did you know there's like 3 Automas for this game? Do you want to try one? So I woke up early the other day. I woke up early yesterday. We didn't end up recording yesterday, but I woke up early and I printed the cards out and gave it a go as well. So there's a few things this Automa does that I do really like. I mean, I like that it's an option, right? More options aren't going to hurt. If you don't like it, don't use it. Simple.
Correct. Yes.
If you do like it, it's free. You can download it off BGG. I feel like that sometimes doesn't get enough love. I feel sometimes I'm quite a critical person, and I say, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that. But ultimately, this is a sort of a leisure hobby, isn't it? So if you don't like it, just don't use it. I thought it was pretty impressive how simplistic and how streamlined it was, given how complex a game Clans is to play. So the fact that the rules are only about 2 pages, and they're quite sort of bullet pointed, spaced out rules for the Automa, the fact that they're only 2 pages, I think, is really, really impressive, because it is a pretty competent opponent. The other thing I really liked about it was it gains and spends money in multiples of 10, which, if it didn't do that, I probably wouldn't have given it the time of day, because that would have been so fiddly, having to micromanage money for both players. I don't know if you had the same thought, but that was, I thought, the cleverest thing about it was multiples of 10, because I hadn't thought that would be an idea.
Yeah, that was a really good idea. Really good idea. 100%.
What were your sort of positives about it? Did you get a chance to play it? I can't remember.
Yes, I did. I gave it a go, and I kind of felt bad that I'd played the rulebook version first, because I felt like I'd been spoiled by that. I think it's a very competent dummy player. I think it's like, if you want a dummy player for Clans, I don't know. I mean, I guess unless you wanted to go really super competitive and stuff, but it even has variations to make it a bit harder if you want an even harder game. I think it's a really good low maintenance dummy player. It ticks a lot of the boxes. Like you say, it accounts for a lot of the admin and stuff, with you doing things in multiples of 10 to make things easier. But I think because I played the game solo without one, I realized that the stuff that you gain from having another player in that form don't make up for the benefits. It's like it has a lot of the negatives but none of the positives, because it acts quite randomly, in that you can predict certain things with a certainty, and certain things are just kind of random. So you know exactly where it will expand to. If you look at the tiles, it'll buy the cheapest one nearby it. So you can go, okay, it's between those two or those three, whatever. But what it will expand is just determined by a card draw. And that's pretty random. So you're not getting the same things you get from an opponent there to the same extent, but you are still having to put in a lot of the legwork. Like I realized at one point that the straw that broke my back was that you have to account for what contracts it can afford, and then what contracts it can afford if it buys one resource from the market. And at that point, I was like, I don't put that much effort in necessarily when I'm playing against another player. It's like I'm playing two players now. So why aren't I just making the best move for it?
I had a very similar feeling. The moment I had the very similar feeling, I didn't mind too much about the contracts it can score, because I found you really only needed to check at on the first turn, and then you kind of had an idea of what it needed to get to be able to be in scoring position for a contract. So I could go, no, there's no chance of it getting any this round, so I could just switch that off.
Oh, that's smart. Maybe
For me, maybe you'll go back and play with that in mind, and you'll go, oh, I love it. But for me, it was the decision of where to expand to. Early on in the game, I thought the expansion algorithm, it is just 3 steps. It is cheapest hexes near it, and then pick the one that will increase its shipping the most, or its settlement score the most, sorry, and then roll a die. That's the decision tree. The issue came when, towards the middle of the game, the end of the game, it had maybe 10 different pieces on the board. That's 10 different hexes to check around each one, and say there's 4 spaces it could build next to each hex. And yes, some of those are going to be high cost ones, but I felt like I wasn't giving it a fair shake if I didn't meticulously check, because I wasn't really playing it properly then, was I? I was playing the slightly different version. And I do admit, towards the end, I did get a bit lazy, and I did just go, that one's probably the one that fits. And I think I was probably right. I got a decent instinct for it. I've played the game a lot. The algorithm itself with the Automa makes quite a lot of sense. So, I probably had a decent instinct, but I did get lazy, and I did just go, it's that one. I'll just say it's that one, which is a shame, because the fact that it builds in a semi-intelligent way adds some of the fun back in that you get in multiplayer specifically.
Yeah, that's true. I did feel like because I knew with a certainty some things and couldn't predict other things, it kind of, for me, it had the best and the worst. So it had the worst of both worlds. Perhaps I'm being too harsh on it, and like you say, it's definitely worth a check out. It's free. I'll pop the links to it in the description.
Yeah,
worth checking out if you fancy giving a dummy player a go. But overall, I think I would say that the solo built into the rulebook, it offers me so much and such a different way of playing that I much preferred it. I would much rather play that solo, 100%.
I mean, the other thing that made me say I'm probably not going to play this again was the fact it can take a contract and fulfill it in one action. As a human player, that takes 2 actions. You have to take it, you wait for your opponent to move, and then you fulfill the contract, you hand it in. The fact it could take and fulfill it in one go, but that it couldn't plan ahead more than sort of 1 step, and so many of the times the contracts were just 2 steps away, it felt like it was simultaneously too easy for it to get the contracts, and when it was close to them, it would just sort of buy grain or randomly do things. I know there was a caveat in the rules for the Automa that if you think it's made a blunder, you can correct it with a better move, but I'm not so much of a fan of kind of wishy-washy rules like that. I know some people like to play solo games like that. I know some people will play chess against themselves, but that's not what I'm looking for.
No, I think if you've got a dummy player and the rules is saying play the best game you can for them, then you're essentially playing me 1 versus me 2, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I always want to avoid that with a dummy player myself.
It definitely wasn't a necessary part. There was no part of the Automa that said, here, you just make the best decision you can. There was a strict thing. It would always spit a decision out. It was just a caveat that if you're someone who likes to play which I think, again, if you don't like it, don't use it. I didn't like it, so I didn't. Yeah,
Quite right.
quite right indeed.
Quite right indeed. And neither of us have tried the semi-official. I don't know why I'm calling it semi-official. I don't know why. That's just what the guy. That's what the Cardboard Herald called it. So I'm going with what they said. Neither of us have tried that. It was very daunting and very very deep, very intense AI-looking system. Maybe we'll revisit that one in the future. But who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
Worth checking out though if you're a big fan of the game.
There is, of course, a fourth way to play if you're solo and looking for a game of clans is come and play with me. I really like it. Please ping me on the Discord. I want to play clans with you.
Lovely. Not so easy to play solo with another player. That's quite.
Can just sit together and chill.
Yeah. Okay. So just quickly turning our attention back to the original rulebook mode, I wanted to talk about something that's been a running kind of theme for a lot of our recent episodes in solo board gaming for me, and something I've been constantly struggling with, and I'd love to get your 2 cents on it all, Kendall, is that I think that Clans of Caledonia absolutely nails intrinsic rewards. I think it is the epitome for me of a game that allows you to just sit down and make really clever moves, take a few actions in just the right order to min-max it and get optimization, and pat yourself on the back and feel good that you've ended with 0 money at the end of that round, and just give yourself a little smile. The thing that, and I don't mind it not having it with clans because it's so fast and so low maintenance. But the thing I think a lot of these games really struggle with is the extrinsic reward. And I can see that a dummy player might add that when you beat a dummy player, you get that sense of satisfaction at beating something outside of yourself. This is what I mean when I say intrinsic and extrinsic. If you haven't heard the previous episode, intrinsic is internal, extrinsic is an external reward. But the way that this game ends in solo is the default that all solo games seem to do, which is it gives you a score. And that's just a number, sort of arbitrary number. And I feel like the way I came to the end of these games every time was I ranged I scored basically, I think, in every of the brackets. And I think it's really funny because some of the games where I felt like I'd played better, I ended up with a lower score. And it was just because of chance, random events like the certain contracts coming out, maybe the layout of the map being a bit unfortunate, maybe the dice messing me up with just a few unlucky rolls, or maybe lucky rolls in some cases and me getting really lucky with it.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I'm not sure the value of that score and whether it helps the game, but I don't know what alternative solo games could offer in that sense.
That's a really big question.
What are your thoughts?
That's a massive open-ended question.
Put you on the spot.
I think in terms of extrinsic rewards, as in if you're calling intrinsic rewards the pleasure of doing something, and then extrinsic rewards is getting something out of it.
That's a nice way of putting it.
I would say in the microcosm of the game, there are a lot of really clever extrinsic rewards. So, for example, the getting money for doing contracts, or the free tile lays for doing contracts, or if you put out 4 production buildings, as a bonus action, you can take a contract, that sort of thing. There's so many of those in clans that it really does reward you for doing things well while you're playing it. So that, I think, possibly contributes to why it's such an intrinsically fun game to play, is because you are constantly being rewarded within the game. That said, when you get out of the game, where's the reward? That's kind of your main question, isn't it? Or your main sort of musing.
I guess it's the finale, isn't it? You're right. Yeah. I think I had that a bit mixed up. I mean, I think there is intrinsic pleasure in making the plans and doing things, but then you are immediately viscerally rewarded by the game. It gives you that lovely feedback loop, and it sets off my dopamine receptors like crazy. It is fun. it is just fun. But yeah, you're right. So the macro of the game, then the overall, and it doesn't matter so much, like I said, for clans, because it is such a short experience. But having that random score at the end and being like, oh, that's what I got, is it? It just, I don't know why, but it's like, no, it doesn't hit. It's just not right. It's either a bit wonky and maybe it needs more attention in balancing. I don't think that's a good idea. I love that you get the variability and that the clans don't feel necessarily balanced because they have such wild and wieldy powers. I wouldn't want to sand that down. And so, in a sense, I don't really. I almost don't feel like there needs to be a score. Maybe the score needs to be a win-loss condition of you need to have X contracts and X settlements or something like that. Maybe better than that, because I think that settlements, for some reason, they don't feel as in line with the game's sort of day-to-day operation. The contracts obviously are.
Yeah.
And maybe it is just a thing of you need to fulfill X contracts. That's it, full stop. But I don't know.
I kind of, in my own mind, have that as a rule. Like, that's what I'll end up, and I'll come away satisfied going, well, I managed 8 contracts that game. And the score it's a number. I can look at it and go, oh, well, I got a good score, I got a bad score. But as a very competitive, I'm an extremely competitive person, normally. It's quite hard to be in clans solo. But I'm an extremely competitive person. And yet I care almost nothing about score in a multiplayer game as long as it's one better than the other person. So I kind of, it's very odd having that attitude and then being presented with a game where that number is the only measure of your success. Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
because you could have made some really, really amazing plays in the game. You could have hit some combos, and it feels like almost like you were saying about a fighting game earlier. It feels like you've just hit your button combo just right, and you got that awesome uppercut finishing move, but you didn't get any points for that. It's weird, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess it's just at the end of the day, it comes back to pushing buttons is fun, and I think Clans is just a game in which the buttons are so fun to press. And it's fun to go, here's some input, what's the output going to be? And just come along for the ride. That I really don't care. And that is saying something about the game, because there's very few games that I think that highly of. Most games that I want to know, did I win, did I lose? Even something like Mage Knight, which is the other game that I would say is a pushing buttons is fun solo game where it doesn't matter about score. There's still the win-loss condition of did you conquer the cities? My own game, I'm working on the second version that has a win-loss condition because I'm not a massive fan of just having a score. And yet, Clans, I don't know why I don't have a problem with it.
It's funny. I think I'm in the exact same boat as you. Like, I'm happy to have been along for the ride. And you're right. I think it's not the best way to measure success in that game, but I don't care at the end of the day. I wanted to raise it with you here because it's something that it bothers me in a lot of games, but because this game is so fun to play, it doesn't kill it for me.
I'd love some insight from someone, because in terms of that sounded so dismissive. I'm sorry. I'd love some insight from someone for once. What I mean to say is I would love to hear from people like on the Discord and so on. I'd love to hear from someone who has like an idea of why that might be. I mean, we've said the pushing buttons is fun. We've said we like playing with the systems. It's like essentially just playing dolls with your, playing Industrial Revolution with all your action men. But, that's ultimately what it is. It's playing make-believe for a bit, but with more rules and spreadsheets and stuff. But I'd love to hear from someone if someone has more of an idea of beyond pushing buttons is fun, because part of me is like, it can't just be that, can it? It can't just be that, but that's the best explanation I've got. And I do think you're insightful, Scruffy.
That's lovely of you. But I do think that it does have something to do with time investment. If it was an hour, 2 hour long game, I'd care a lot more about the score being the final thing, because that is like not even it's just a tiny little thing at the end, and it's just like the whole rest of the game has been so good to you.
Yeah.
like you say, it keeps giving you those external hits, those lovely moments of you did well there. Yeah, you did a contract. Now you get this. Oh,
Exactly.
lucky you. It's like playing a video game. You just leveled up. Oh, lovely. Now you're a little bit better at doing the thing you can do still. Yeah. So I don't think that it's such a problem for clans. But I'll tell you what, it would be a hell of a listener question to throw out there.
Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it?
So, is there anything else you'd like to bring up with clans, or shall we move on to that lovely section of the show where we ask our listeners a question for the week and hear back from last episode's question?
I'll do my final thoughts on clans. Really, really fun game. Really fun solo, really fun multiplayer. If you like Terra Mystica and you're worried it's too similar, don't be. It plays very differently. It's very easy to learn if you know Terra Mystica already because it's very similar, but it plays completely different. And I've got both. I love both. They're both really fun games. Clans is better. The end. Okay.
Yeah, I'll throw out my final thoughts as well for anyone interested. It feels like eating an eclair all to myself.
Just for reference for the listeners, Scruffy, you hadn't played this game at all solo 2 days ago. How many times do you think you've played it now solo?
Oh my god, I wouldn't be able to say. I've nearly played once with every clan. I think there's the only one I haven't. I think is the one that uses the boats. So what's that one called?
I know the one you mean, the Fishers one. I can't remember which one they are, but yeah. So that's about 7 or so plays in what 1 day,
Yeah.
2 days. If that doesn't say
Clan
it,
McDonald. That's the only one I haven't tried. Clan McDonald. Yeah, no, but yeah, it's a really, really fun, really quick game. It's definitely one of my top solo games of all time.
brilliant
For sure. I can absolutely see myself coming off this podcast and cracking open another game, maybe with Clan McDonald, to see how the fishermen work on solo.
Perfect.
Let's ask a listener question for this episode. And I think we should follow on from what you were saying, what you wanted to hear, Kendall, since you're the co-host today. So what is our question?
Okay, well, my question then will be, what is your favorite win condition or way of tracking your achievements in a solo game? So, beat your own score. Do you write your scores down? I know some people who play beat your own score games do. Some don't. Do you prefer a win condition? Do you prefer a score? Is there another option that I can't think of that's better than both? Let us know, and what game implements it the best is something I'd like to hear as well. What game implements it the best? That would be really, really interesting to hear from you all.
And even if there's not like one that you really like, but one that you find really interesting that we haven't thought of, that would be really cool to hear as well.
Yeah.
In questions, it's something that I like I said just now, it's something that I really struggle with in a lot of solo board games, and I don't have the answer to it. So if any of you listening has the answer, tell me, please. Come and join our Discord. Tell me the answer.
Answers on a postcard to Scruffy Gamer, PO Box.
Okay. Since Norm isn't here this episode, we'll read your feedback from last episode. I only remembered when we came to starting to record this that that's something that I needed to handle today because Norm's not here and I'm so used to him doing it. So I haven't read these. I've given them a quick glance now, but I haven't read these beforehand still. Kendall will help me out, I'm sure, with reading a few of them, but I'm just going to dive in and reiterate the question from last episode now. This was episode 19, and it was, who is your favorite unique character to play in a solo game? And our first reply was, and why is it Norowas, from Kendall.
Well, there was some disagreement about that one. And why is it Norowas?
Comrade Boris says that's a funny way to spell Tovak, and then Norm responds, you're both spelling Arafia wrong. So I think that kind of sums it up.
Seems to be, honestly, everyone I asked seems to have a different favorite mage knight. So I guess that means they're all fairly well liked, fairly well balanced.
Yeah, well, there was one we had from Tignic who says, for me, Goldix. So just following on from that, most impressive looking mini, nice skills and nice special cards when I play Mage Knight. I tend to focus on spells and he's a good fit for that. So Yeah, that's just browsing over that. Already a bit more love for the Dragony Boy in Mage Knight. I really struggle with my favorite Mage Knight character. I like them all except
It's
Norroa.
Brevolar. Your favorite is Brevolar.
Yeah, Brave. See, the thing is, I really like Bravelar's style, but he's really rubbish. So he's my favorite, but he's rubbish.
Fair enough.
Okay.
We got one from Banana Republic here, who said, "Myself, I am Tovak, I am Hatchet, I am Friday, I am Ant-Man, I am Rusviet, I am the Woodland Alliance, I am a world leader, I am an investigator, I am an Ironlander, I am a dystopian leader, I'm a bird collector, I'm a historical figure, I'm a dungeon explorer, I'm a dream warrior, I am Dmitry Gorchakov, I am none, but I am all." Honest answer, if you've gotten to know me a little bit here, it's difficult for me to pick a favourite. Ha ha ha. That was a great response, Banana. Thank you for that.
Yeah, love it. That's so right. Like it's really hard to pick a favorite when there's just so many different games and different worlds, right? Like, oh my god, yeah, couldn't agree more. So we've got another one here from Hen, who says, "My answer is Wakan from Pax Pamir. It feels like some kind of ideology sweeps over the country and causes massive changes and swings. Most of the other Automa decks I play feel like faceless point generators." And that's a really good point. Did you ever get around to trying Pax Pamir, Kendall?
I haven't, no. I know you and Norm want to get me into a multiplayer game of that at some point.
Yes.
And I'm up for it. I think I'm up for it. I can't remember. It's been too long. It's been too long. I don't really remember what the game's about anymore. So you'll have to give me a big refresher on that.
Yeah, well, no, but the Wakan in it you wouldn't see in multiplayer.
No, that's true.
Totally right. Like, I found it really challenging at first, as I mentioned in the episode. But when it was kind of explained to me as not a person but an ideology, like it's just a big, massive force, like Hen said, sweeping over the land. It really makes a lot more sense when you think of it that way. That it cheats as a player because it's not just one person.
That's very clever and thematic.
It is. Which it does make it a bit more confusing that they use the she, her pronouns in the rulebook for an ideology, but whatever, and call it Wakan. But okay.
I mean, maybe it's like a ship. You know, you call ships she. Do we call ideology she?
I don't call ships.
No, I know. I don't either. I don't often have much cause to talk about ships, to be fair. So we've got one from Peter Lovelace as well, recurring friend of the show, Peter Lovelace. "My favourite unique character to play is Hatchet from Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion." I'm just going to paraphrase here. They're easy to play, but a lot of fun. All about optimizing movement and positioning because they throw their favourite axe at an enemy for extra damage. But if they want to throw it again and get that extra damage again, they have to go and actually physically pick the axe up, which that sounds really, really cool. They say, so they're easy to play, but you still feel clever and mighty.
That's really funny because do you remember, Kendall, my character for Gloomhaven? Glaxar the Friendly.
Beatrice the Boulder.
And Beatrice the Boulder, yeah. So he's one of his moves is he throws a boulder, and I gave it a name in the story. Like I'd always fetch Beatrice and throw my massive boulder. It was a lot of fun. So it's really funny that they actually implemented that into the expansion and has a character that has their favorite axe to throw, hatchet to throw.
From what I've heard of Jaws of the Lion, it sounds like a really, really good take on the Gloomhaven formula. To be honest, there's a lot of things I've heard about it that are really good, and Hatchet is one of them. Sounds really, really cool. Yeah,
well, thank you for your feedback, Peter, and just another shout out again to their podcast they've started, Einzelspiel. Check it out. We also have a comment here from Varga. They say, so I've got a great answer to this. Hopefully someone has played it. In Street Masters Aftershock, you play as one of the villains in the Redemption 2 box. Her name is Miss Matrix. Normally, when you play Street Masters, you're playing cards to your play area, activating them to deal damage or combo with other cards you've played. Then when you're done, your threat area activates, then the main enemy activates with cards they've accrued. But with Miss Matrix, you're playing your own cards in the different play areas, they do wild stuff that circumvents rules. I've played her in my last 5 games, and she's a beast. So yeah, she sounds amazing. I've never played Street Masters Aftershock. Have you tried that?
No, I've never even heard of Street Masters Aftershock. All I can think of in my brain is Street Sharks for some reason, which probably is not the same thing. Street Masters. No, I'm going to have to look that up though.
I'm going to take a wild guess and just say it's just like Marvel Champions, and they just mess around with the rules. I don't know. I have no idea what it's like as a game. I'm looking at it on the Googles now, and yeah, it looks fun. Little minis and stuff going on. Cool. We'll have to keep that one in mind.
I like the art for that.
Yeah, definitely something to consider. And if we do cover Street Masters Aftershock, we will have to pick up Miss Matrix and see how she plays.
Absolutely.
Apparently she's a beast. Okay, that's all the feedback I have from last episode and the question. Apologies if I've missed anyone in the Always Player One messages or anything like that. Like I say, I completely forgot that this was my responsibility this episode, and so if we have time next episode, we'll try and belatedly get back to that. But we'll just remind listeners what the question is for this episode. Kendall.
Yeah, so the question this episode is, what is your favourite win condition or way of measuring achievement in a solo game? So it could be win condition, it could be beat your own score, it could be something else that we've not thought of. What's your favourite way of measuring achievement, and what games do it well? Which games are good at it? What's the best example? Kind of about 5 different questions in one there, because I can never just say something.
I always find it hard to narrow it down to one question.
I can never say something straightforward, and I expect Scruffy's going to be cutting a lot of my rambling down so that it fits in an episode.
There's 2 ramblers for this episode, so we'll see how we do. But yes, thank you so much for stepping in for Norm this episode, Kendall. You've been an absolute delight to have on, as always. You are wonderfully insightful and erudite, as always, and it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you about one of our favourite games, Clans of Caledonia.
Well, thank you very much. And it's a shame that it's coming in sort of poor circumstances. I wish it could be more like the Christmas quiz episode, but yeah, I always like coming on the show, and if you want to have me again, you know where I live, so just show up in the middle of the night.
So I'll just burst through the door with the recording equipment. So as always, if you'd like to respond to the listener question for this week, you can join our Discord. It's free to join. Links are in the description. Head over to the listeners questions tab and just throw your comment in there. It's an absolutely lovely community. Everyone is wonderful in there and very welcoming. You can email us at alwaysplayer1podcast@gmail.com. We are also on Instagram, and we are on Reddit as well. Links to everything in the description.
You can tell Norm's the social media person.
Yeah. And we have a Patreon if you'd like to support us on there, which gives you access to our mini-series of the planning phase, a behind-the-scenes look at how we decide what episodes we're going to do, and a sneak peek at what we'll be covering in the next few episodes. So thank you again for listening. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks, or 1 week if you sign up to our Patreon. So say bye-bye for now, Kendall.
Bye-bye for now.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to support the show, don't forget to check out our Patreon page. The links to that are in the description. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Always Player One. Until then, reach out on Facebook, Instagram, or by email to keep the conversation going.